Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, where we all get together and talk, complain about, give our opinions on the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm Anthony Cosenza. Joining me once again is John Sheeran. John, I hope, as I said before we kicked off the show here, I hope that you are having a little bit less stressful of a week than I am. And as if the Bengals don't give us enough stress as it is. Everything else in life has kind of been just stockpiling a little bit this week for me, but I'm getting through it, my friend. I hope things are better on your end.
We're just getting through the grind right now. I know for a fact that my mom does not listen to this podcast. She's not one of our millions of listeners a week. So I'm free to say that we're starting to plan her 60th birthday party, like just this week. So we're starting to get that in circulation at the moment. Fortunately, my sister is spearheading those efforts, so she's taking a lot of the stress off there. Shout out to my sister Kelsey. But that's about the only thing that's possibly stressing me out right now. I couldn't be more or less stressed, I guess, from OTAs, unlike a lot of people on Twitter right now.
Yeah, the sisters are usually pretty good about that. I've noticed. My sister was pretty good about that too. She was quite the planner, and luckily they helped take a lot of that. It's not for a lot of guys, at least. It's not really a guy's strength to plan parties and the details, the minutia. But I hope it's a rager nonetheless. And your mom rings in 60 the right way, dude.
Yeah, I told her that anything that needs to be moved or put in the ground or anything, I'm all there. In terms of decorating, probably gonna have to delegate that to her.
Hey, if you want to fly me out to DJ the Fiesta or something, dude,
She was kind of thinking to something like that. She was like someone in a chicken costume or like a male stripper. Like, no,
I don't know about that one. I can't do the latter. I can't do that one. I wouldn't feel right about that. But anyway, it's good to have you here, man. Talking Bengals once again. Before we kind of dive into everything, I want to let everybody know we didn't do it last week, but we're going to do it this week once again. We're going to do another standalone listener question show. That will be tomorrow live, tomorrow being Thursday. So if you're getting this episode on either Wednesday evening, Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, it'll be tomorrow Thursday, the 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the West Coast, Best Coast. And we're going to be taking your questions. We've already got some texts queued up, and the things we don't get to in this live YouTube chat, you can tweet them at us at BengalsOBI. You can email us, theobinsider@gmail.com. We'll also have the video and a live comment thread up on cincyjungle.com, so you can leave your questions there. You can also tweet John at John__Sheeran or myself at CJAnthonyCUI. But try the Orange and Black Insider stuff accounts first. That's where we'll be looking, and we'll take about 20-30 minutes depending on how many questions we get, how many people we have. So join us live if you can. Otherwise, that'll be on all the feeds, which are of course iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, the Megaphone platform. It's also going to be on our YouTube channel for video, and then all the stuff will be on cincyjungle.com. So, John, the Bengals now have completed the OTAs and have transitioned into mandatory minicamp. So we are slowly crawling to training camp and into the regular season, kind of the dog days of summer here. Luckily, there hasn't been too big of a lag in terms of news or excitement. It's been a little bit of both yet again as the Bengals kick off mandatory minicamp, and of course, where it all centers, pun sort of intended, is on the offensive line. The Cincinnati Bengals used, and wisely used, their first-round pick on Jonah Williams. And lo and behold, it would not be a Bengals season, a Bengals offseason, without their first-round pick having some sort of injury issue. It's inevitable. It's kind of unbelievable. A tradition unlike any other, as old Jim Nantz would say. We don't know what it is. They're keeping very mum about it. This training staff and this medical staff has not had the most stellar track record when it comes to treating injuries, diagnosing injuries, all of that kind of stuff. So we sit here, John, and I guess we'll start with this question for you. We don't know what it is. They're saying, they tried to ask Jonah Williams himself on Wednesday. He wouldn't answer it. All questions are directed to Zach Taylor. Yet he's on the side field. He's out there kind of with the position group. No braces, no crutches, nothing. And it's quote unquote dinged up. What do you make of that?
I tell you what, if the Golden State Warriors can completely bumble an injury and misdiagnose a potentially torn Achilles and then clear that said player, Kevin Durant, to play on a very bad Achilles to then tear it and rupture it again, how am I supposed to trust the Bengals with an unidentified or an unknown injury? And of course, this isn't anything new. We've seen this in the past a lot. It could honestly be anything from like both ACLs are torn to just a slight cramp in his hamstring. We have no idea about the severity of this, and I wouldn't be worried that it is going to be a serious injury, because if it probably was, we probably would have heard a little bit more about it. We probably would have seen some sort of visual impairment from Williams in the way he walks, the way he moves around. Apparently, he wasn't in any like crutches. He didn't have any braces on his legs. We don't even know like where exactly the injury is. I thought I heard it was in the leg, but I'm not entirely positive with that. But I'm not tremendous. It's not an issue until it is an issue, of course. And if it impacts the amount of practice time he has in training camp, if it slows down his development there and minimizes the amount of reps that he has when they are starting going into full contact, then that becomes a problem. Because last year, Billy Price has talked about the lack of a full offseason in his rookie year definitely, prohibit him from being fully effective in his rookie season. And then obviously when he had that injury during the season, it made matters worse for him as well. So, we were lucky to have Williams, go through those first team reps in the early portions of OTAs. Unfortunately, he's not going to finish out minicamp with all the rest of those guys. But I mean, the next 6 weeks just has to be just him recovering for whatever he's dealing with. And I don't really blame Taylor or the rest of the staff for just keeping this on the low and just giving the usual PR, spiel to, whatever questions are being asked. But I mean, I just don't care to care about this until it's something that I need to worry about, because, there's no football yet. There's not even practices yet. So we're just going to see how this plays out. And honestly, like this could benefit some other guys in the offensive line to get more reps in that, and could give the coaches a better view about, where other pieces may fit better. Because like you said, Cordy Glenn moved back to left tackle while Williams was out for this week. So maybe that, changes their minds about where he's going to play long term. So, this can be turned into a positive, but right now it's just nothing that we can worry about because we have no idea what it is.
I'm debating which route to take here in terms of where we go next on this, but I'll say this, I guess I'm worried about it because, you said you don't blame Taylor for being kind of vague. I'm a little worried about it on that front. It's kind of almost like, well, we haven't had the trainers look at it. On one hand, it's kind of like, well, maybe it's something that they think is potentially serious and they're letting it rest without surgery and all that kind of stuff. And they're letting it sit. And hopefully, things can, it's a flare up and it kind of goes down. Or, maybe it's also a sign that because they're not rushing him to trainers, staff, all that kind of stuff, under the knife, all that kind of stuff, maybe that's a sign that, it's not anything that's super urgent and needs to be taken care of and therefore not that serious. So, we've kind of gone from Marvin Lewis is partly cloudy to, dinged up from Taylor, the vague thing. The thing I don't understand is why being so vague when you don't have a game next week. You're not trying to play this chess match right now. I guess maybe you're kind of setting a precedent as a coach that you're not going to tip your hand throughout the rest of the season or the seasons ahead that you have with this team. Just a weird situation.
I think him just being the first-time head coach and him just taking the cautionary route here kind of makes sense. And there was the thing about that they didn't even test him if anything was wrong for a week or so. And they kind of found this out a little late because I think he initially heard it during the closed portions of OTAs, and obviously no reporters were able to see it when it happened or were able to catch up to it. soon after it happened. So I guess there was that time frame that kind of helped him out with that to keep some sort of secrecy on here. But obviously they couldn't maintain that as soon as reporters got back in there and saw that he was in fact on the sideline, and then asked the question for Taylor. So like, I'm not going to defend the way that they handle injuries because it's basically indefensible at this point from the past 20 years that we've seen. But still, I just don't feel the need to freak out when I don't really have to, and especially from the fact that, you know, it's probably not anything very too serious. And honestly, like, this is more for established veterans and guys who maybe have had some injury issues in the past. I'm looking at you, Tyler Eifert. I don't really care how much you practice in OTAs. Obviously, it means a lot more for a rookie who's expected to start at an important position on the offensive line. But at the end of the day, just get healthy for training camp. That's when it starts mattering, especially for young guys. If you can play a little bit in the preseason, and if you have, you know, enough reps in practice to establish some sense of chemistry on the offensive line, that's all I really care about. If you happen to just have a little bit of a minor injury in OTAs and coaches are kind of taking you out, I'm not going to sweat over it. But yeah, there is some issues with, you know, the process of the way that they manage this and that they delegated with the doctors and all that stuff. The vagueness is not really worrying me, but just their overall process of how they manage it, that's always up for concern because you just can't rely on them for that.
Yeah, yep, that's kind of the biggie. The biggie for me. You know, I look at the live YouTube chat. Good friend Mike Donahue says, I read on Yahoo Sports he was, quote, occasionally stretching his back. I hadn't had the chance to see that yet. So, you know, maybe there's a back tweak there or something like that. And they're just kind of resting it. And then this one, I guess this is where we'll kind of segue a little bit into from Vape Guy, who I think is our good bud John from Kentucky. I sure as hell hope we don't go through this with Jonah, what we did with Dre. And for those who know our good friend John from Kentucky, he hasn't been the biggest Dre Kirkpatrick fan, but he has a point because, John, my God, you go back years and years, probably, I mean, the healthiest class or in terms of first-round picks or high picks that I can remember in recent memory is 2011. You look at 2012, Dre Kirkpatrick missed a lot of time early on in his career, right? And then struggled to get on the field in the other seasons that he was healthier for a first couple of seasons. Tyler Eifert, next year's first-round pick. Only missed one game as a rookie, but I think we know now all of the injury issues he's had throughout his career. Darquez Dennard, couple of injuries his rookie year in 2014, right? Cedric Ogbuehi, that was a redshirt year, and that was kind of planned on, but redshirt year there. William Jackson missed his entire rookie season. You know, you keep going through the list here. You mentioned Billy Price was a little bit behind because he had missed some time here and there, missed some time in the regular season last year as the 2018 first-round pick. So John Ross, 2017, missed time with a bunch of injuries as a rookie. So, I mean, I don't want to sit here and be, you know, negative Nancy here, but you got to call it like you see it. And when you're drafting these guys, granted, it's a lot of bad luck, but you also kind of create your own luck, whether it's proper scouting, proper medical staff, all of that kind of stuff that goes into selecting these players. You have to be able to rely on these guys, especially early in their careers.
Yeah, and that's completely fair because, you know, going through that list, Ogbuehi, Ross, and Price had known issues going into the NFL, and they took the chance on them regardless because, you know, Ross got injured during the combine, so did Price. Price was the pectoral, Ross was like the labrum shoulder. Ogbuehi, it was obviously the ACL that he injured the previous season in college, and they all, you know, like you said, they didn't expect Ogbuehi to play, but like that pick was like a very defining pick for the turn of the franchise and how he was supposed to be the, you know, the replacement long-term for Andrew Whitworth, you know, and for him to miss the whole rookie season and then put him behind, even further behind in the long development path that he had to take as a player that obviously, you know, derailed his career to a certain extent. And, you know, the other guys, there was a little bit more of just injury luck and just how, you know, unfortunate circumstances or just the kind of the style that they play at. I think when you look at that list, though, and what kind of impacted them the most, I think Ross stands out to me a little bit. And obviously injuries wasn't the only issue with his rookie season because there was a lack of trust, obviously, from Lewis and the coaching staff, and, you know, confidence issues stem from that. But, you know, with him being out early in that offseason program and then suffering an injury in the preseason that forced him to miss week 1, that kind of, I think, just made things worse from that standpoint. And then I think in turn stemmed further confidence issues down the road, because the less he was on the field, the less that he was getting those reps, the more further he was behind in terms of getting acclimated in the offense. And I remember when he was drafted, I was thinking that his skill set was perfect for what that offense lacked, because they had Brandon LaFell, they had Tyler Boyd alongside AJ Green, but they didn't have anybody that could stretch the defense. So for him to have an immediate impact was so important, so vital to getting that offense back on track, because the offensive line was still okay, decent. Unfortunately, it didn't end up being decent in 2017, but that wasn't where my main issues were focusing on the offensive side of the ball. And for Ross to just lay a complete egg in his rookie season, primarily because of some injury concerns, I think that impacted them a lot. I considered Price with this, but with how well, or just relatively well, Trey Hopkins played in his place, it kind of, it softens the blow for that injury as well. And with the way he obviously, he wasn't expected to start. So I think Ross just kind of stands out to me just for those specific circumstances and his potential impact for what he could do on the offense, and the impact that he had. It's just a vast difference that unfortunately the offense couldn't overcome, I guess.
Yeah, he's still playing catch up. You know who sticks out to me for the exact opposite reason, who was a first round pick in this regard and in that time frame? It's Kevin Zeitler.
Ooh.
Kevin Zeitler had missed in 2013 and 2014. He missed 4 games each, but started 16 games as a rookie. Started 11 games, played in 12 in 2013, started and played in 12 in 2014 with the Bengals, 16 and 16 games a pop in 2015 and 2016. By the way, that doesn't include playoff games. He did start those as well. And then, lo and behold, with the Browns, he started and played in 16 games each there. So the one durable guy you basically have as a first-round pick, you let go. And here we are talking about the offensive line, where guys like Abwehi, Billy Price, Jonah Williams have been brought in to rebuild, and they can't get on the field. So,
but I do think that they do have a sense of self-awareness of what has happened in the past, and now they're seeing the situation with Jonah Williams and thinking, okay, we don't want to have these past mistakes kind of repeated, because the great thing about Williams is that just in 3 years he had 44 starts. Like, health was never an issue with him. He was always durable. He was always counted upon in Alabama. So now that he has some sort of injury issue, I don't mind the fact that they're not necessarily rushing him back, and they're not really stressing that in terms of getting him on the field. So I do like that they are showing some signs of competency and just kind of easing guys back from injury, because it kills. And the lack of success from their first round picks in terms of a first year impact has been one of the main detriments of this team. So I think we have to give them credit for that, for just handling this situation in an opposite way of how they've handled it in the past. Even if it's like a logical thing, it's the smallest thing to do, I still think that they kind of deserve credit from that, I guess.
Yeah, we may be making a mountain out of a molehill here, right? I mean, Jonah Williams could come back, and it's purely precautionary. We don't know yet. Like we've said, there's no braces, there's no casts, there's no crutches, anything like that. So, it could be just, hey, let's get him some rest. This is going to be a valuable guy throughout the year. Ironically, too, Jonah Williams was a very durable guy in college, too. Just a little bit snake bit there, I guess. Transitioning to a little bit more positive news, John, the Bengals signed veteran offensive lineman John Jerry. They did release Rod Taylor, their 7th-round pick from last year. Taylor was a guy who also was injured for his rookie year, but had showed a little promise. But with an acquisition like that, you understand the move. You wrote a piece on Cincy Jungle a little bit about Jerry's connection to the Bengals offensive line coach and Jim Turner, and your thoughts on him in terms of fit, need, especially with Jonah Hill. That's an actor. Jonah Williams. Jonah Hill in the offensive line. That'd be funny. Jonah Williams and Clint Bowling still on the sideline. Your thoughts on them bringing John Jerry in, and then obviously with that, they're kind of moving things around, getting some different looks.
Yeah, so Jerry, just looking at just a little bit of film from the past and his PFF grades, he's had a more solid career than I expected. A former third round pick out of Ole Miss, wasn't drafted by the staff with Taylor and Turner, but played his last 2 years at Miami with Taylor and Turner, and those offensive line units were infamous for being garbage in terms of protecting Ryan Tannehill, but he was actually a decent player with them. Unfortunately for him, he only got a 1-year contract out of Miami because of his involvement in Bowling Gate. We're not going to get too far into that, but basically he was one of the main perpetrators alongside with Richie Incognito. He was basically like, his main henchman alongside Mike Pouncey, but that we're not really going to get into all that. He went to New York, played 4 seasons there, essentially earned his way to a 3-year contract in the 2017 off season, but that contract was restructured after a disappointing 2017. Basically, he had a career year in 2016 with that offensive line, earned an extension, fell off the map a little bit in 2017, was eventually cut and replaced by 2018 draft pick Will Hernandez. So he's now 33 years old. I think he's like the oldest Bengal who's not a special teamer, and when I say that, I mean Kevin Huber and Clark Harris. So he's the oldest player on the offense and defense. We still don't have terms on the contract, but I can't imagine it's anything more than just vet minimum for 1 year. So this guy could either be making the roster as a rotational backup, or he could be cut in like the second week of training camp. It could be anything in between there. But he was a career right guard with Miami in his first couple years in New York, and then I think injuries forced him to move to left guard to finish out 2017. And, again, he wasn't really impressive in 2017. And his best years were probably the last years in Miami under Jim Turner, and then his first couple years in New York. So you got a guy who's been relatively just average throughout his career, but his best days are definitely behind him. And in terms of who else they have at that guard position, I don't think he's better than, obviously, Bowling. I would take John Miller's youth over him and definitely take starting Christian Westerman over him. So you're looking at a backup here, and I think it's important to make the distinction that this move was in reactionary to the fact that Rod Taylor was not recovering from his torn ACL in time, so they needed another body there to basically bolster that depth, and the move was not made because of Clint Bowling's injury or Jonah Williams' injury, and the fact that they needed a guard body in case they needed to move Cordy Glenn back to left tackle. So I think that was a key distinction that they made, and the fact that this guy is just here to just be a body at the position. And if it turns into anything more, great, but I'm just not really, because his best days are definitely behind him.
So you got Clint Bowling, you have Justin Evans, you have John Jerry, you have Michael Jordan, John Miller, Alex Redmond, Christian Westerman, and Trey Hopkins, all as guards, or Hopkins is guard center.
He's basically a center at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of interior linemen. Then you have also have Billy Price and Brad Lundblade as true centers on the roster. So that's a logjam. And like you said, Jerry's a guy who's been kind of serviceable. He's been okay at times, above average at others, and maybe even a little bit below average at other times. Seems as if he's a little bit better pass blocker, I think, in Pro Football Focus metrics that I think I saw that. So, it makes sense on a lot of different fronts. Familiarity from, the offensive line coach standpoint and all of that. I guess, how do you feel about this switch up of everything and the shuffling around? Obviously, it's needed without Bowling and Williams, but I mean, one part of me says this is a mess, right? I mean, they're still kind of adding guys after the fact, guys that are 33, weren't in the league last year, and could be looking at a rotational spot, a starting spot, whatever. And they've moved Cordy Glenn back and forth now. The one guy that we're all uncertain about, Bobby Hart, is the only guy who has not had his position be shuffled around in terms of starting alignments. On the other hand, we need to figure out who the best 5 guys are. So where do you stand on this?
Yeah, I think it's the shuffling is only a problem if there's just no clear solution, because I think I can say with some sense of confidence that they're going to do basically everything they can to find the best five people as a unit, not necessarily the best five blockers, because I don't think that any team aligns itself with the best five individual blockers. I think they just try to find the best five guys that kind of fit together and all work together. Because if we're trying to find the best five blockers, I think a couple of guys that are on the bench right now would probably be starting, but that's neither here or there. So unless they're unable to find that, I think the shuffling is fine for now. Obviously, once you get into the deep part of training camp, you need to find just a group to establish some cohesion and chemistry. But like you said, there's like 9 or 10 guards, or maybe even more than that. There's not a lot of tackles on this roster. And even the ones, like half the tackles have like never played an offensive snap. Half of them are undrafted free agents. One of them is Ken Perkins, who has, I believe, 6 snaps to his name. So that's very alarming to me. And one of the tackles that does have starting experience is Bobby Hart. So there's that. So like the whole situation with moving Glenn inside creates minimal depth there. And that's honestly why I'm still holding out for a Trey Hopkins extension, because while he is like their best backup interior guy aside from Christian Westerman, he also has tackle experience. He might be like their third best tackle on the roster, and that's including Cordy Glenn and Jonah Williams. He might be better than Bobby Hart because he has minimal experience there, but that the minimal experience is a lot better than the larger sample that we've seen from Hart. So I think Hopkins' value on this team is extremely underrated, and the fact that he's only under contract for one more year is a little concerning to me, because aside from Williams, they didn't invest smartly or wisely or enough at the tackle position. And I'm very interested about who's going to be that third guy, because if they do eventually list Glenn as a guard and have him starting at left guard, are they only going to carry 3? Are they only going to? They're not going to carry 2. So who's going to be that third guy? Are they really counting on Hopkins being the backup tackle along with being the backup center? How sustainable is that? Because if it isn't, and you want to keep Hopkins inside, you're gonna either keep like O'Shea Dugas or Keaton Sutherland or Justin Smith even. So you're gonna have your backup swing tackle is going to be someone that probably can't be relied on if he has to come in for an injured Jonah Williams. And if that's the case, maybe they move Glenn outside to one of the tackle spots if someone gets injured, and then you have a whole nother layer of shuffling there. So the tackle depth is definitely my biggest area of concern, but not necessarily about the shuffling right now, because I think there's going to be less commitment to certain favorites that we've seen in years past, and there's going to be a more consolidated effort to get the best 5 out there, just to get the best unit out there. But just the overall depth at tackle position is where my main concern is, especially with the starters, the projected starters that are going to be out there, because that leads to a precarious situation if injuries inevitably occur.
Yeah, there's 2 things that make me say, okay, let's calm down a little bit. One, you touched on quite well, is that it's early. It's early. If this was August, right or right smack in the middle of training camp or something like that, I'd be more worried. I'd prefer that they would have things more settled, have guys back, important guys back healthy. So I on that front, I think we can kind of say, okay, we don't even know what's going on with Jonah Williams and how severe or not severe it is. So let's take a step back there from that standpoint. The other thing, I am with you on the lack of tackles or the lack of depth there. I'll say this, though. A lot of these guys, these interior lineman guys, are guys that are versatile. If they do keep Clint Bowling, which I don't know why you wouldn't, but there's more and more writing on the wall, I guess, as to that may or may not happen. Clint Bowling has taken snaps at tackle in the NFL and has played at a capable level at that position. He's a good guard. John Jerry, you mentioned, played both guard positions. Michael Jordan played both guard and center in college. Trey Hopkins, again, guard center, but also a little bit of tackle versatility. You look down at the few tackles they do have. Keaton Sutherland played tackle and guard in college. Jonah Williams probably could play, if you ask him to, a couple of different spots on the line. Cordy Glenn, they're messing around with him. So there is versatility. And I think they're probably trying to test how far they can take that versatility of some of these players and some of the more important players on the line. So I don't necessarily mind that, but I'm gonna mind it in 2 months.
Yeah,
I guess is where I'm going with that. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts.
We can't exactly blame them for shuffling now because they're only shuffling because of Jonah's injury. And if Jonah isn't injured, I'm assuming he's just out there and it's the same 5. And I think that's the 5 that they plan on doing. And once everyone's healthy, like our whole gripe is when things go bad, not if things go bad, when things go bad, because this is the Bengals we're talking about. What is their contingency plan? What is their response going to be? How are things going to be reshuffled? What is the depth going to be like? It's going to be important about who takes those 3 or 4 final spots on the line and just kind of save this group from collapsing on itself, because that's what we've seen the past 3 years.
Well, we'll see how it all shakes out. Hopefully the injuries to Bowling and Jonah. Bowling hasn't really fully been made totally clear as to what's going on there either. I think we've heard shoulder maybe. They're being real mysterious about it. And, hey, like I said, those are the two or at least 2 of the 3 most talented offensive linemen you would say right now on this current group. So if they've got something going on, make sure they heal up and they play when they're ready to play and when it's important. So, I guess it's understandable from that point. Just a little frustrating not knowing what's going on and getting the full picture. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. You can get this show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on Google Play. You can get it on the Megaphone platform as well as YouTube and Cincy Jungle. We will be having on Thursday of this week, we will be having a listener question standalone show. We hope you can join us live, even though it might be in the middle of your workday. You can still join us. Go on the Cincy Jungle comment thread, leave a comment if you're in front of a computer or on your phone, tablet, anything like that. You can also call or text us 949-542-6241 starting at 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. We'll be taking those calls and texts. You can hit us up on Twitter at BengalsOBI or via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. We look forward to seeing you Thursday afternoon for your questions on a live broadcast that we'll be bringing you then. John, I guess if we want to kind of continue at least a little bit more good news, AJ Green came back to practice, and by some clips that we saw, granted they were limited, but he looks good. He's exploding out of cuts. He's doing a lot of things. Full work for what is quote unquote full work this time of year, but he looks good. I think anytime you have a guy like that back, it means good things for the team. I don't know if you have any brief thoughts about him returning, but I do have an overarching question that I want to ask, unless you want to talk about Green coming back to practice a little bit.
Yeah, if he's practicing, that's obviously good. Because did he have a surgery in December? I want to say like it was
late.
Yeah, it was late. Yeah, because they try to see if he can come back, and obviously that it's just a whole nother dilemma with the Bengals and that. So right. Yeah, he got injured in like October, and then then he like came back in like late November. Then he got re-injured again. Like, okay, let's just shut this guy down. So it's good. It's very good. I remember it was like him and Andy were still like late in the rehab process in like April when they first started those activities, because they got a new head coach. So it's good. It's good to see him, getting fully integrated into new offense. And obviously I don't really care if he practices in OTAs. I don't really think he needs to, even under new offense, because it's just hard to mess up a guy that talented. Basically, it's hard to not put him in. Am I surprised at what?
Were you surprised that he came back that soon? I thought it was kind of quick.
Yeah,
it's not a knee, but
it's just one of those things that just lingers, right? Like it's just kind of like it could be something with Jonah that has to deal if it actually is a back injury. Like I've never fortunately experienced a toe injury, but it's just you would think that it's just not that literal big of an issue, but it's just something that would take a long time to be comfortable again. And his game is so predicated on just making those tight cuts and getting separation at the line, that putting a lot of pressure on that part of your body. And just if it's not 100%, then he can't fully move and get back to that play speed that he was at. So for him to be back at this point, it's a testament of the condition that he's in and just the kind of player that he is and just the kind of athlete that he is. And it's just another level of freakness that we just have to appreciate.
Yeah. What I want to ask, is your opinion on, since he's back now, before he went out of the lineup last year, he was tearing it up. And the Bengals were, too. It's not a coincidence that they were playing very well when he was healthy, and he was playing individually at a high level. You go back and you look at that Ravens game, he was insane that game. He was, I think, 30 at the time. I think he's going to be 31 during this season. I guess you can look at it one of two ways. Freak injury and was dominating beginning of last year, or a 30-year-old wide receiver. The inevitable is starting to come. We might see a slowdown. There are a lot of different factors. The question I'm asking is, are we going to get the same old AJ we've come to know and expect when he's healthy? 12 to 1,400 yards, 80 to 90 catches, 7 to 10 touchdowns. No matter what, he's automatic. Do you see him putting up even better numbers under this new Zach Taylor system, or are you expecting a decline, whether a steep one or a small one, being that he's kind of getting up there in age, coming off an injury, a couple of seasons in the last few, he's had to end on IR.
Right. So I think in the worst variations of the Bengals offenses in the past 8 years, AJ has still produced at a high level. So I think with just a player that talented, it works for basically any position. Like I remember when Wade Phillips took over the Rams defense, and people were concerned about Aaron Donald transitioning to quote unquote 3-4 system. Like, how is he going to be when he's two gapping? Like you don't two gap Aaron Donald. A guy who is as smart as Wade Phillips is going to put his best players in a position to succeed. And I have no doubt that you can make a similar argument with AJ Green. It doesn't really matter what system that he's in. He's going to produce, amongst the best of NFL receivers. And I think if we were to see an uptick in production, it would be because the change in scheme is helping Andy Dalton more than it's helping AJ Green. Because, you can make a sound argument that, the Bengals offense has done a minimal job of creating easy yards and creating easy separation for AJ Green. And he's had to work a lot harder to get open opportunities for a quarterback that doesn't really like to throw into tight coverages. So the fact that he's been able to produce under these relatively unfair circumstances compared to other elite wide receivers in the NFL is all the more impressive. So I think we can always count on AJ Green to produce at a high level as long as he stays healthy. My only concern with him at this point is just if he can play 12 to 14 games a year, because 2 of the last 3 seasons, unfortunately he's been finishing the season hurt. He hasn't been able to complete full seasons, and I don't think that's a testament of him getting older. I think it's just mainly been bad luck, because injuries aren't necessarily a stable thing to count on unless it's something that has been always happening in his career. And that's certainly not been the case with AJ, because this first 5 years he was, had a clean bill of health and played, I think, 80 games in his first 5 or 6 years. So when you get older, obviously your body starts to tear down a little bit, but I think he's just kind of that freak, like his body type and his lean and his muscle tone, like everything about him as a physical athlete is very rare, even for the wide receiver position. He's not Julio Jones, obviously, and he doesn't necessarily win off freak athleticism, but he's just a type of athlete that is like the way that he maintains in shape during the season and the off season. It's unparalleled, especially compared to other players on the Bengals. So I don't have any doubts that he's keeping his body in tip-top shape for the season. So I think any injuries that he possibly sustains or unfortunately undergoes is either bad luck or him just naturally getting older. So that's my only real concern with him at this point, is if he can finish seasons towards the end of the year. And maybe that could be attributed to maybe more gentle usage and implementing other guys into the offense where he doesn't necessarily have to carry the load. But I just think he's a guy that, as long as he is healthy, no matter what scheme is around him, and even if he has an average quarterback, he's going to produce at a high level, and you can count on that production week in and week out. It's just a matter of him staying healthy, which I think at this point, he's due for that comeback for in terms of health, because injuries are such a regression type thing. So I'm optimistic, and especially because if this offense is really supposed to elevate Andy, then naturally it will elevate AJ too, which is only good news. And hopefully he produces at a level that gets him back into that conversation, into that elite top 5 conversation, whatever you want to have.
Yeah, if you're if it's basically new and improved AJ, same AJ in terms of statistical output, or a declining AJ, I'm going to go with kind of industry standard AJ. And the reason I say that is I don't see a decline. I do see a guy that could come back with his hair on fire and lighting it up. We could have seen the best statistical season from AJ Green last year had he stayed healthy the entire 16 games. I mean, he was on a pace that was just ridiculous for a little while there. So I mean, he was upset a couple of years ago when his season ended and he didn't continue his streak of 1,000-yard seasons. Obviously, this injury bothered him too on a number of different levels. So I can see a guy coming back very motivated. He's in a contract year, so if for some reason they do not get a contract done this summer, which the Bengals typically like to do, and AJ Green, by the way, recently said that he wants to stay in Cincinnati. If for some reason that doesn't happen, then, he could come out really with a chip on his shoulder and wanting to prove everybody wrong and win that next contract. But I think the system will spread the ball around a little bit more. I think there's been some trust now gained with a Tyler Boyd who stepped up nicely last year. Potentially even with John Ross, who showed a little bit more last year, may have even higher confidence this year. Tyler Eifert, if he's back and playing any kind of substantial amount of games, I think there's going to be a lot of passes to be distributed. So I think while AJ Green probably could, if he's healthy, could put up bigger numbers, the reason I'm going to say kind of same old AJ Green in terms of stat production is kind of the other weapons, the commitment to the run, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's definitely fair. I just think that with your point about like not elite production, like I'm looking at just like the 2 seasons where AJ missed like 6 or 7 games. The first time was 2016, and if I remember correctly, he was like just shy of 1,000 yards that season, and he missed like 6 games. So his pace was like almost or a little bit over 100 yards a game. And had he played like the whole season, he could have eclipsed 1,400 yards. And I think it was similar to last season. And even then, like that was when Tyler Boyd started picking up like his pace as well. So if we want to just take the direct comparison to what this offense could look like under Rams' approach, he's probably not eclipsing like 1,300 yards. He's probably going to stay in that 1,200 yard range, 80 catches on like 120 targets. And that's assuming that he stays healthy and everyone else around him stays healthy. But, aside from Tyler Boyd, if I were to bet on the guy that, plays the most and gets, the most consistent targets per game, I would always bet on AJ, right? Like I wouldn't bet on Tyler Eifert staying healthy. I wouldn't bet at this point on John Ross staying healthy until I see it happen. So with AJ, like, we can get into like a fantasy argument, but he's like the staple, like guy that you can count on for production in this offense. Aside, in the passing game, obviously you would assume that Joe Mixon would get more than his fair share. So I don't see him slowing down until he does. And I think another point, I'm going to kind of disagree with you here on just the contract. First of all, I think we both agree that he's going to get that contract and that the Bengals are going to do everything in their power to get him signed before they play Seattle in week 1. But even if he doesn't, I'm not going to say that he wouldn't get motivated, but I think he would get the same effort, the same motivation factor if he is signed and if he isn't signed. I just think that he's just that kind of rare breed that certain thing doesn't really get. Having financial security and having that contract wouldn't minimize his overall ability and his overall effort. I just think that he's just kind of different in that way, and it's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that players who kind of slack off after getting some financial security are necessarily bad. It's just I don't think that's the kind of player that AJ is. And even if he does get that contract, I think you're going to still see him, give 110% or any other cliche you want to throw out there. So I think that's just something you can count on with AJ, and that's just the overall point with AJ, that you can count on him, even if injuries do happen, once every 2 years, and they're usually freak incidences. You can just rely on AJ to go in there week in and week out and just be a productive factor. And that's definitely something that Dalton has relied on in over the past 8 years.
Well, and the Bengals typically like to get these extensions done the summer prior to a star of theirs or a valued member of theirs hitting the free agent market. So, the hope is that they both, and the fact that they didn't go hog wild in free agency yet again, the hope is that a guy like AJ, who, as I mentioned, just recently expressed the desire to remain in Cincinnati really for the rest of his career, the hope and the desire is that the Bengals will take care of AJ Green and Tyler Boyd this offseason to keep that offense intact and hopefully continue to give Zach Taylor weapons going forward. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. You can get this program on a number of different platforms, including iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play. You can get it on the Megaphone platform. You can get it on YouTube and CincyJungle.com. That's where all of our content is. So get it there when you can. And as I mentioned, we're going to be having a standalone listener question show on Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So tune in, get in touch with us on a number of different social media platforms, and we love to hear from you. We want you to be part of the program. We want you to be submitting questions. I personally, John, I liked the last standalone thing. I thought it was pretty.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we actually had so many. I mean, I shouldn't say actually, because the engagement level of listeners and fans of the Bengals is very high. But we had too many to air. Hopefully, we have that same problem this week as well. So please join us.
So the AJ Green discourse online is definitely fun, because debating receivers is just a nauseating practice. The Vontaze Burfict discourse, on the other hand, can get a little annoying in the head, and that's definitely a concussion joke for Burfict. But Burfict, I guess, is kind of in the news this week as the NFL announced that the Oakland Raiders, will be getting Hard Knocks for training camp this year, which you couldn't really pick a better one. I remember in the Senior Bowl talking like, if there's any obvious candidate for Hard Knocks, it has to be the Raiders. And the primary reason is John Gruden, obviously, because you have a head coach who was on Monday Night Football. You have a GM who was on NFL Network. So both those guys are used to the limelight, used to being talking in front of camera. So that dynamic of how much that they're going to be on camera is going to be interesting. But with the announcement of the Raiders, Burfict's name was kind of in this group of characters that everybody's looking forward to see behind the scenes, whatnot. So he was grouped with Antonio Brown, Richie Incognito. Believe there might be another one that I'm missing. But yeah, Burfict was included with those three guys. And honestly, like the one thing in common that they all have is probably CTE, and that's about it. Because you just look at that group, and there's obviously gripes with Burfict, and you and I definitely have our fair share with that. But Burfict is not. I think there's going to be a level of disappointment with the general viewers, the general football fans, who also happen to have an HBO description about what they're expecting with Burfict, because his troubles obviously have always been on the field and kind of losing his control when it actually matters. But as a practice player, or just as a locker room guy, he's not on the Incognito levels. He's not on the Antonio Brown levels. And maybe the interactions between, his new teammates and those two in specific might be a little interesting. But I honestly, I'm more intrigued about the potential friendship that he could start with Antonio Brown, because I remember there was something on Twitter about him reaching out to him as soon as he was traded there, and how this was going to start a whole new leaf for both of them. But I'm more intrigued about Burfict proving the misconceptions about him as just a person off the field wrong, more than I am about him potentially starting to fight with Antonio Brown. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think, to be honest with you, I think he's going to be not as kind of what you said. I don't think he's going to be as entertaining as a lot of people think.
Yeah.
I think he'll the sound bites and the things you'll get from him as he's practicing on the field and in preseason games. I think that'll be crazy. But I think in terms of actual like walking around the locker room and exposure to the media and things, I said this before we took the air. I actually kind of liken it to when James Harrison came to the Bengals a few years ago and the Bengals were on Hard Knocks. Do you remember James Harrison as the cameras were walking in locker rooms, he'd like turn around and turn his back to the cameras. He would
put up a finger too.
Yeah, he'd close the door and put up a finger. And, you know, to me, and seeing how Perfect treats and has treated certain media members, he arbitrarily blocks a lot of media members. By the way, Vontez, if you ever want to unblock me, man, go for it. So he doesn't really interact a ton on social media. So I think the on-field stuff you'll see in practices, on preseason games, I think you'll see kind of the wild man. They'll probably mic him up, I would think, but in terms of kind of the everyday stuff, you see guys walking around the locker room. I don't expect a super larger than life character. I think Antonio Brown, you'll get a lot of that stuff. That guy loves attention, loves social media. So I think you'll get a lot of that. There's some other guys on here that, that seem to be kind of should be characters. I think Max Williams, the tight end, he's kind of an interesting cat from what I understand. You've got Derek Carr, who's in an interesting year. I don't know that his personality is super outgoing, but I think that that's an interesting guy. You mentioned Incognito, which is, oh God. There's kind of a lot of bigger sort of big. They also had LaMarcus Joyner, pretty good defensive back that they added this year. So, there's some guys on there that could maybe carry the show from a character standpoint or, an entertainment standpoint. I just don't know if Perfect's one of them, at least as a whole picture.
The two factors of Perfect are the first one, obviously, is that everyone remembers, the hit that he had on Antonio Brown. I think that's where people are guesstimating the animosity is going to stem from. But as far as we could tell, Perfect was a extreme. Perfect is a loyal person, and he's going to have his back for his teammates no matter what team he's on. So the fact that they're both teammates now, I don't think you're going to see any reserved or brought up animosity or bad blood between the two of them. I can't speak for Antonio because we haven't been following the Steelers and haven't been following how they interact in practice. We've only basically seen the impact of the at least the past couple years, and specifically just this last year. So we don't know how he's going to adjust to a new environment, and we don't know how he personally is going to adjust playing with Perfect now and practicing against him every day. But from Perfect's side, I don't think there's going to be any of that reserved, hatred and resentment from them, because just from that point, I think this is a fresh start for Perfect and the chance to revitalize his career. Even though the health issues need to be taken a lot more seriously than they are. And also another thing, like Gruden is obviously an offensive coach, and he's probably going to delegate, if he hasn't already, most of the, like Paul Gunther, who was Perfect's defense coordinator and linebackers coach, he's now his defense coordinator again. He's going to have full control over that defense. But the relationship between Perfect and Gruden is something that I kind of want to see on camera, because obviously Perfect had the full pledged support of Marvin Lewis, who was basically like acting like a father figure here when he was in Cincinnati, and the dichotomy between his relationship with Lewis and his relationship with Gruden is something that I definitely want to compare and see how that actually unfolds on camera. But other than that, like again, there's plenty of other teammates of Perfect that I think will be more intriguing to watch. And obviously with Hard Knocks, there's always that one guy that we just have no idea who his name is before, and then everybody knows his name after. With the Texans, it was Charles James. With the Browns, it was God, it was that one tight end who like loved rocks. I don't remember his name now, but there's always that one guy that you don't know, and I don't think it's obviously everybody knows perfect. So I think they're gonna make some type of effort to kind of publicize it, but after the first couple of weeks, I think he's going to be a forgotten factor, I guess, for HBO, and they're not really going to be able to capitalize on a lot of it. But again, like I don't expect people who aren't Bengals fans to feel this way, but this is just kind of the fair warning for now, for in 2 months when it first goes to air.
Yeah, and Hunter Renfrow might be a guy that ends up being an entertaining guy to watch on that team. Just in the preseason games and kind of that Charlie Hustle type of guy. I want to ask you this before we get out of here, John. Do you buy into the there's a stigma with going on this program, the distraction of all the cameras and the spotlights, the potential of other teams getting a grasp on what you're trying to do, some of the, insight into meeting rooms and all that kind of stuff. Or is that just, hey, I mean, it is what it is today because, social media and NFL Network doing, the mic'd up stuff. It's just kind of part and parcel of the thing. And really in the preseason, you're not showing that much anyway.
Well, that is definitely interesting because but Monty Jones literally today, I think, said it best. John Gruden didn't want to be on Hard Knocks, but he loves being on camera. So like, like how he handles creating unawarely a product for people on HBO and also being more reserved than we're used to seeing him when he's mic'd up and on camera. That's definitely going to be something interesting to watch because like the Raiders are kind of in a similar position to the Bengals where they're definitely not favored in their division, and they definitely have an interesting cast of characters, a lot more than the Bengals. So, how he handles, being more reserved and just being who he is and who he's always been, just a very personable guy, a very energetic guy. It's gonna be fun to watch. But yeah, I think Mayock is gonna try to reel him back from going full QB camp on us. But if it all falls apart, it'll be even better television to watch.
Yeah, I think also. His brother when he was with the Bengals was pretty entertaining on the show.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't play a huge.
Don't touch
role.
the merchandise.
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't terrible to watch. So and his brother has probably even a bigger personality than Jay did. So it'll be interesting. And I guess I'm old school, and I think it kind of provides more of a distraction than might be needed. But
for sure,
I think also you can do it if you really trust the locker room, and if you're a top-notch organization and you've had success before. I think if you've managed that and know how to handle that kind of stuff, I think then it makes a little more sense. But really, over the past handful of years, you've had the Bengals twice, you've had the Raiders, and you've had the Browns. Not necessarily the beacon of recent NFL success, but
yeah,
or quality management. But what are you going to
do? Jeff Fisher Rams as well.
That's right. Yeah, the Jeff Fisher Rams. Oy. Well, hopefully you all enjoy Hard Knocks. The Bengals will not be on it, but you'll see some familiar faces both from the Bengals and from within the division. That's gonna do it for us tonight, I believe. John, any final thoughts before we get out of here and tee up for tomorrow's listener questions segment?
I do not. I thought I did going in, but I really do not. But just
you're in party planning mode.
Yeah, just. It keeps sending us in questions. If we don't get to them tomorrow, I'm sure we will try to answer them into a future one, or maybe one of us running the account will actually add you back. So definitely keep sending us in questions. We're always interested in more various questions that you have. So don't be shy.
Yeah, and to that point too, obviously it makes the most sense to send them in tomorrow as you tune in live with us. But if for some reason you're not able to get to any of that stuff to reach us, you can send it to us, throughout the week. We also, if we can't get to them on the air, we do try to get to some of those in a mailbag segment on Cincy Jungle too. So, if you do join us and you submit a question, we didn't get to it, keep it at cincyjungle.com. Speaking of cincyjungle.com, that is where this podcast is housed, and you can get all the content, as well as on our channels in iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone, and of course YouTube. Subscribe to those channels. That way you get our feeds and everything gets updated. You get shot all the up-to-date material we're putting out more and more. Aside from our standard weekly show, we're going to be putting out a lot more. So tune in to our weekly show if you're able to live. Tune in to our listener question show tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. That would be Thursday. And we look forward to seeing you. Otherwise, we'll see you when we see you. We'll see you when we see you. And let's hope for a little more positive news on the injury front for the Cincinnati Bengals going forward. We'll see you next time.